Hey guys, Corpse Flood coming to you today with a top 5 nostalgic games, or the games that make me feel the most nostalgia when I play them. I was tagged in this to make this video from the Game Grinder. He's got a really cool channel and a lot of cool reviews, pickup videos, and all that kind of cool stuff. Check out his channel. I'll leave a link in the comments below, or the description rather. And we'll just get it started. First things first, a lot of my nostalgia is playing games at buddies' houses or cousins or uncles or whatever, because when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to have a Nintendo. My parents were like, nah, you're not getting one, that's all you'll ever do. So look at me now, I'm playing catch up, so that's a kind of a weird feeling now, playing all these games. I have actually more nostalgia for wanting to play certain games than actually playing them. So we'll just get right into it. There's a lot of cool games that I did manage to play with my buddies, rent over the weekend when I'd stay there, or when they'd come over to my house and bring it with them, stuff like that. So without further ado, we'll get started. With number 5, we're going to go with Castlevania Bloodlines. This was my first experience with the Castlevania series. It's a absolutely awesome entry in the series. I'd say overall, probably my second favorite one, next to Castlevania 4. But really, Castlevania is one of my probably top 3 favorite game series of all time. So and this game really started it for me. I finally got a Genesis when it was kind of on its way out. N64 was probably already out for about a year or two, and I finally found one at a garage sale for $20. I got about 30 games and 2 controllers with it, so I was set from the get-go with awesome games like this, and I must have played through it 50 times. It was challenging as hell, but I got used to it, and kind of set the pace for every time I played a Castlevania game. They're always a good challenge, and it was a lot of fun. It really showed the potential of the Sega and pushed it to its boundaries, so I really enjoy it. Still to this day, I like to go back and play that one. Keeping with the Genesis, but also with the Super Nintendo, I'm going to pick Maximum Carnage for my next most nostalgic game. This has got to be one of my favorite beat-em-ups ever. I'm a huge fan of beat-em-ups, and I'm also a huge fan of Spider-Man, as you can see by the shirt. This was at like the peak of my love for Spider-Man. This was an awesome arc in the story in the comic books. So I was reading up on it, and then the game came out. It was just perfect mixed together to be able to play that. I remember just renting it automatically when I'd go to my friend's house and bring it with me like I owned it, and we just play it over and over and over and over. It was hard as hell, so a lot of the time we didn't get through it, but we just take turns back and forth, and man, I wish this game had co-op, especially since there's Spider-Man and Venom. So then about a year and a half later, they came out with Separation Anxiety, which is a sequel to it, but it's nowhere near as good. And honestly, we just went back to just renting the single-player one and trading off because we had a lot more fun with Maximum Carnage. It's still one of my all-time favorite games, and when I started retro collecting, it was one of the first things I had to go after. So that's a good thing to have in the collection. Next up, I'm going to go with WWF No Mercy. WWF No Mercy was probably one of the best wrestling games of all time. Just about anyone who likes wrestling games will attest to that. It's a timeless game, actually. It came out on the N64 when the Attitude Era was at its peak, and then it was followed by a bunch of good games, led into the SmackDown games and all that, all made by THQ, some really solid games. It was preceded by great games like WCW NWO Revenge, and when they switched over to making WWF games, it was WWF WrestleMania 2000, but the one that really stands out to me is No Mercy. Playing that anytime I had buddies over, we were all big wrestling fans back in the day, and we'd just make our own characters and just have at it. It was awesome. Doing 40-man First Blood Knockout Royal Rumbles, just hardcore matches all over the place. It was really good for being someone who's into wrestling as much as myself, my friends, and pretty much anybody my age around that time. It was another one of those games I had to find right away when I started retro collecting, because it was one of the reasons I decided to start looking for my collection. Because actually, the first console I managed to get brand new was the N64, and I had about 14 games for it. I just bought and brought to buddies' houses, and we'd play them on the weekend, and it kind of made me the popular friend, like almost like friends having a bidding war, like, no, he's staying at my house this weekend, he's staying at my house. Because, I had all GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and all the good multiplayer games and some good racing games, and they all had like just the system and maybe like the one game they got with it for Christmas. And the funny thing is, I was working to save up and buy these games, and I never really saved up to buy the system for myself. I had about 14 games, and finally my parents at Christmas time were like, you know what? Seriously, he's got like 14 games, controllers, everything. He's got everything except the Nintendo. Let's just cave and get him the Nintendo. So luckily they finally did, and I was super ecstatic about that. Before that, the closest to having one was borrowing my uncle's for extended periods of time when he was out working or whatever, and he probably had some hand in getting them to just give me the system so that he could have his back. It was pretty awesome. So led me to getting some single player games finally, and really getting into it. That's probably why I'm really hard into the N64. And unfortunately, that was also a collection I had the entire thing stolen except for my copy of GoldenEye. I had it lent to a friend at the time. Someone stole my entire N64 collection and was really actually picky stealing GameCube games too. They took like 3/4 of the GameCube games, but not all of them. I mean, if you're gonna steal, might as well steal all of them. But the real dick move was when they stole that. They stole my memory card, so I couldn't just replace the games and continue. I had to replace the games as well as the memory card and start from scratch. So that was a super dick move. I wish I could find out who did that. I'd really like to get that stuff back. But through playing the Zelda Collector's Edition set for GameCube that had like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and Zelda 1 and 2 on it, that's really what got me going, man, I miss my N64, and years later I finally decided to start picking it up again, and that's the story of actually how I got into retro collecting. I saw Zelda 2 at a thrift shop. I got it for $1, and I was like, man, I don't have an NES, but this has to go on the shelf. And then I kind of whirlwind from there, and I got really obsessed with it. I got an N64 at the same place for $10 and just went crazy grabbing whatever games I could find, and finally went back to get the systems I never did have, like the Super Nintendo and NES. And I luckily still had my Genesis collection. I had it lent to a buddy, and it was really a good thing that I'd lent him my entire collection, because my parents' basement flooded after I moved out, and all that stuff would have been down there still if I hadn't lent it to him. So it's a good thing I got that all back, and it was almost like an interest thing. I got back my collection, but he also gave me his collection and his Super Nintendo games because he knew how much I was into it. So that was a really awesome thing to do. It was almost like an investment. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, back to this list. I'll go with my next pick, and that is Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2. I don't know how many hours I put into these games, playing with my brother and even by myself, a little bit online, not too much. I kind of got the Xbox Live late in the original Xbox thing, so it was kind of, I don't know, I only played a few matches at a buddy's house, but I was really, really into this game. My brother would come over, and he still does come over and play this game for hours. And the thing about the old ones is it was before they relied on DLC packs to get more maps and stuff. So you buy these games and they got like 30 maps or 40 maps each on them on the disc. So you're like, we had a laugh because when they were coming out with the new Battlefront, we're like, oh man, look at all the maps in this game. We played for probably 3 hours without even repeating a map, and we're like, yeah, the only way we're gonna get that with the new one is if we buy like 4 map packs. And lo and behold, it comes out and they got a $70 4 map pack deal, and you probably still won't get as many maps as those games had. That being said, I do like the new one. It just feels a little incomplete. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a riot to play, but it starts to get a little repetitive pretty quick. Whereas the old games, I could just play them all day. I don't know how long I played. Like, yeah, he still comes over and we look at my wall of games and we're just like, what do you want to play, man? And it always ends up just going, you know what, fuck it, let's just play Battlefront. It's our old go-to, so that's why I'm still so into these games. And I was pumped, a little let down, but I think, they keep adding free stuff along with the paid stuff, so I think it'll get there. It'll be cool. Maybe it'll be a learning experience for them, and they'll do more for the next one, hopefully, if they make another one. Being a big Star Wars fan, my brother and I, too, is another reason why we got so into it. And it was cool to play a Star Wars game where you weren't, just Luke or Anakin or whatever hero they made up for the game. You're just you could be a regular stormtrooper and make the difference, in the battle, and, win the Battle of Hoth single-handedly as a snowtrooper or something. The second one, they added the heroes in, and that was a cool addition. It was a fun thing to play, and it's really fun actually in the new one too. But I think actually the first one might actually be my favorite, but they're both solid timeless games to me. And I guess for the fifth one, I'd have to go with the game that started it all for me. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening for the original Game Boy. I got this game, and it was the first game I ever got in my whole life. I was in probably grade 4, and my friend was coming to my birthday party, and he's like, "Oh yeah, what do you want me to get you?" And I was like, "A Game Boy, obviously." And I was like, just joking. We were in grade 4. He doesn't have money for that. And what do you know? He comes to my birthday, and I open all my gifts. I open his gift last, and what's in there? The original Game Boy bundled with The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I think I'm the only person on the face of the earth who got the original Game Boy and it didn't come with Tetris, but I ain't complaining because it's what started my gaming in general. More hardcore than playing with buddies once in a while and making them play games that they were sick of. I finally had my own game to play as much as I wanted, whenever I wanted. I'm pretty sure I cried. I was so ecstatic to have my own game system. And it was the only one I had for probably another 6 years, probably. And it's what got me into Zelda. And as you can see, I'm still a huge Zelda fan. I've got every Zelda game. I got all this Link crap everywhere in the room. And I owed all this game. I think I just got a lot of play out of it, and I keep going back to it. Actually, the save battery still works. This is my original copy and my original Game Boy. It's really a perfect game. So I think that's it for my list here, but I've got a few honorable mentions. This was a super hard list to chisel down. I think it almost benefited me not owning the systems as a kid and playing them more at my friend's house until I got the Genesis and the N64. But needless to say, there's still a bunch of games that I had played at my buddies' houses that still hold up to me a lot. And those are, my honorable mentions are Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2. Huge games for me as a kid. It was you could beat the shit out of your friend and not get in trouble. Mortal Kombat I used to play at the same guy who gave me the Game Boy. Used to play at his house, and obviously he owned it, so his brother and him would just take turns kicking my ass, and then I'd get in that one victory once in a while, and maybe even just the one round victory, and I just felt like the champion. I'm like, yeah, you can't take that away from me. I actually beat you. I don't even own this game. And then Street Fighter 2 was actually more of a... wasn't really the cartridge, I would say. It was more like playing at the bowling alley. I used to go there and play a lot. They used to have a Street Fighter 2 arcade cabinet there, and we just poured money into it, any quarters we could get. they always kind of switched up the games there, but it always seemed to keep the Street Fighter 2 cabinet there. They had Terminator 2 for a while there. That's my all-time favorite arcade game. But about 6 months ago, I was actually able to buy that very Street Fighter 2 arcade machine, and they just restored it, and it's in the game room right now. If you see my game room tour, you've seen it. It's my pride and joy. I was actually able to buy a piece of my childhood about 20 years later, and it's in perfect condition. It's a really exciting thing to have. Any of my buddies that knew of that machine when I bought it, they were a little bit jealous of that, needless to say, and I still want to have some of them over and have a tournament or something one of these days. And a couple more games here that I have a lot of nostalgia playing with. When I got the N64, I was finally able to play more one-player games by myself. One of the first ones I grabbed was Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. One of the best Star Wars games ever made to me. Honestly, it probably doesn't hold up to a lot of people. A lot of people trying it for the first time might not like it as much, but I just remember how blown away by the first level was the Battle of Hoth, and no game had really done that, or even done it justice yet. So it was a really cool start to the game. It had a new character. It was a good way of blending a couple of the movies together. It was a really cool story. I had to have it. Another one was actually a Sega Dreamcast game, and that's Demolition Racer, No Exit. A buddy of mine and I used to rent it from a local store here and just play the shit out of it. We didn't even really do the racing very much. It was more just the demo derbies, and we just made little inside jokes and crap and just had at her with that kind of game. We neither of us are really big racing game fans, but we kicked the shit out of that. Another one that was big was obviously Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, and to a lesser extent the Hyperstone Heist, which was this basically like the Genesis version, but it was not nearly as long. A little bit of a different story, but they came out around the same time. Those were and still are a huge multiplayer game for now. My daughter and I have played through them. It's a really cool thing to kind of feel like I passed down to my daughter and get her started out the way I kind of started out. And another one I used to play at my buddy's a lot was Zombies Ate My Neighbors. This is another one that I had to have, and I was on the search for quite a while when I started collecting, and gladly I've got it on Genesis and Super Nintendo now, so super pumped about that. It's just one of those awesome co-op games. And this next one I was actually it was almost in my top 5, but it was kind of a cheater, so I didn't put it in there. That's the Genesis 6-pack. It was one of the games I got when I got that Genesis bundle I spoke of, and it's got Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, and Super Hang-On. And Golden Axe and Streets of Rage are two of my all-time favorites. Like I said, I'm a big beat-em-up fan, and I don't think anybody could beat the Genesis for the beat-em-ups. Streets of Rage series and Golden Axe are just awesome. And I honestly preferred Maximum Carnage on the Genesis to the Super Nintendo, which will go against what a lot of people would say, but it's probably just because of the nostalgic first experience with that. And speaking of the Game Grinder, who tagged me in the video and gave me the idea to do it, he was talking a lot about Neverwinter Nights and it being reminiscent of the Baldur's Gate games, and that got me thinking. I remember playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and along those lines, a lot of Champions of Norath. I was not a big RPG fan. I've always been into the lore of like all that kind of stuff, the Dungeons and Dragons type stuff, and the dungeon crawling and all that stuff. And these kind of RPGs were the only kind I would play for the longest time, because as I said, I went to buddies' houses to play games a lot of the time, and I had a buddy who'd be like, "Oh man, come hang out." So I would go to his house and hang out, and probably for the first 2 or 3 hours he'd be sitting there playing an RPG like Final Fantasy or Lufia 2 or Chrono Trigger. So they were fun to watch for a bit, but as you know, those games are fun to play but not so fun to watch. So I used to just sit and watch him play it and be really interesting at first, and then I'd just be like, "Oh dude, let's go do something," or you want to play something else?" And because of that, I'd actually put a kind of a bad taste in my mouth for the turn-based RPGs for a long time. The funniest thing is now that's like my favorite thing to collect. Those are my favorite games to play. I finally got over it, and that same friend who I used to go watch play those games actually came home. He moved away, but he came home and a lot of his stuff was stored here, and he just dropped by with a big bag of Super Nintendo games for me, and a lot of the games that I had to watch him play ended up in my collection, and I was so ecstatic because a lot of those games were like $80 games, like I said, Lufia 2 and Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana I think was in there, Mario RPG, just a bunch. He saved me a ton of money. He was one of my best friends growing up, and he still is one of my best friends, so it was a really cool gift. He was home for Christmas, so it was probably the best Christmas gift that year, but don't tell anyone I said that. I think that's about it for my collection video here for the my top 5 nostalgia. It's like I said, when you're a retro collector, nostalgia is a huge part of it. So and the rest is catch up, which is about 90% of me going, man, I wanted to play that game so much when it first came out, but I didn't have the Super Nintendo, and unfortunately Super Nintendo is like one of the most expensive to collect for, so a lot of that stuff is like out of my price range or out of what I'm willing to pay anyway, even if I can't afford it. I'm a bit of a cheap collector, but I get my deals, and I get good deals, so it all works out sooner or later. Alright, I'm not sure who to tag in here. I don't have a lot of YouTube friends that are on Facebook, but maybe I'll add some after the fact. I'm not going to tag any in the video, but thanks again to the Game Grinder for tagging me in this. It was a lot of fun, and maybe I'll make something along this line and tag him in it to see if he'll do that too. Alright, you guys have a good day, and like, comment, subscribe, and look me up on Facebook, corpse_flood gaming, and have a good day, man.